The winter of 1881 pressed down on Portland, Oregon, with a cruelty that even the oldest settlers claimed they had never witnessed. And Emma Thompson stood at the edge of the frozen Willamette River with tears streaming down her face, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to white clouds in the bitter air. She had walked 3 miles from town in boots that were never meant for such cold, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders doing nothing to keep out the wind that howled through the bare cottonwood trees lining the riverbank. The ice beneath her feet groaned and shifted, and she did not care. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. Behind her, the sound of horse hooves crunching through snow made her turn slightly, but she did not wipe her eyes or try to compose herself. A lone rider approached, his silhouette dark against the white landscape, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. He slowed his paint mare to a walk as he drew closer, and Emma could make out the worn leather of his coat, the rifle strapped to his saddle, and the way he sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man who had spent more years in the saddle than on solid ground. Kenneth Zimmerman had been riding toward Portland for supplies when he spotted the figure by the river, and something about the slumped shoulders and the isolation of the scene made him change direction. As he drew closer and saw she was crying, her whole body shaking with sobs that had nothing to do with the cold, he felt his chest tighten with an unfamiliar sensation. He had seen plenty of hardship in his 28 years, had witnessed death and desperation across 3 territories, but there was something about this woman's grief that reached past all his carefully constructed walls. He dismounted 20 feet away, not wanting to startle her, and led his mare forward by the reins. When he was close enough to speak without shouting over the wind, he stopped and studied her more carefully. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and whipped around her face. Her dress was good quality but worn, and her hands were bare and red from the cold. She looked at him with eyes so full of pain that he felt it like a physical blow. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice rough from days of silence on the trail, "you should not be out here alone. This cold can kill a person." "Maybe that would be better," she whispered, and her voice was hoarse from crying. "Maybe that would be easier than carrying this weight." Kenneth took another step closer slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "What weight is that?" Emma laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "Everything. My father died 3 weeks ago, pneumonia. I nursed him for a month, sat by his bedside every night, and he still slipped away. The bank took our house yesterday because I could not make the payments. My younger sister went to live with our aunt in Seattle last week because I had no way to provide for her. And this morning, the man I was supposed to marry told me he could not go through with it because I have nothing left to offer him. No dowry, no property, no prospects. So I walked out here because I needed to be alone with all this pain, and I did not care if I froze to death while doing it." The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam, and when she finished, she wrapped her arms around herself and looked back at the frozen river. "I have lost everything that mattered, everything, and I do not know how to carry it all anymore. It is too heavy. It is crushing me." Kenneth stood silent for a long moment, his heart doing something strange in his chest. He had lived a hard life, had lost his own family to cholera when he was 17, had spent the years since then drifting from ranch to ranch, never settling, never letting anyone get close enough to matter. He had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But looking at this woman, this Emma with her broken voice and her grief-stricken eyes, he felt something shift inside him. "Let me carry that pain for you," he said. Emma turned to stare at him, confusion breaking through her despair. "What?" "Let me carry it," he repeated, taking another step closer. "You are right that it is too heavy for one person, so let me help shoulder the weight. You do not know me, and I do not know you, but I know what it is like to have grief crush you down until you cannot breathe. I know what it is like to want to lie down in the snow and let the cold take you. But I also know that pain does not last forever, even when it feels like it will. So let me carry some of it for you, at least long enough to get you back to town and somewhere warm. You are a stranger, Emma said, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edge of desperation. Kenneth Zimmerman, he said, touching the brim of his hat. I work at the Double R Ranch about 15 miles south of here. Been there 6 months, longest I have stayed anywhere in 10 years. And you are Emma, apparently. Now we are not strangers anymore. Despite everything, Emma felt the corner of her mouth twitch. It was not quite a smile, but it was closer than she had come to one in weeks. That is not how it works. Why not? Kenneth moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, though he was careful not to touch her. Way I see it, being strangers just means we do not have any complicated history between us. Makes it simpler. You need help, I am offering it. No strings, no expectations. Just one human being helping another get through a hard day. Emma looked up at him properly for the first time, really seeing him. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the edges under his hat, and eyes that were somewhere between blue and gray. His face was weathered from years outdoors, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned, though he was not smiling now. There was something steady about him, something solid and real that made her feel anchored when everything else in her life was spinning apart. Why would you do this? She asked. Why would you care about a stranger's pain? Kenneth looked out at the frozen river, his jaw working. Because 11 years ago I was sitting by a different river with a gun in my hand, ready to end it all. My whole family was dead. I had nothing and no one. And a man I did not know sat down beside me and talked to me for 3 hours. He did not try to take the gun or tell me I was being stupid. He just sat there and listened and shared his whiskey and told me stories about his own losses. By the time the sun came up, I did not want to pull that trigger anymore. He probably saved my life that night. I never saw him again, never even got his name. But I swore to myself that if I ever had the chance to do the same for someone else, I would. So here I am, keeping that promise. Emma felt fresh tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were different now. I do not want to die, she whispered. I just do not know how to keep living. Then let us start small, Kenneth said gently. First, we get you back to town before you lose your toes to frostbite. You got somewhere warm you can stay, Emma shook her head. I have been sleeping in the church. Reverend Michaels lets me stay in the back room, Kenneth frowned. That place is drafty as hell. I have seen warmer barns. Here. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders before she could protest. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like leather and pine smoke, and something else she could not quite identify. My mare can carry both of us back to town. Then we are going to get you somewhere properly warm and get some hot food in you. When was the last time you ate? I do not remember, Emma admitted. That settles it then. Kenneth swung up onto his mare and then extended his hand down to her. Come on, no arguments. You can go back to being miserable tomorrow if you really want to, but today you are going to let me help. Emma stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Every instinct told her to refuse, to maintain her pride, to handle her problems alone as she had been taught. But she was so tired, so cold, and so utterly empty that she did not have the strength to refuse. She placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers, strong and warm. He pulled her up behind him with surprising ease, and she had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. Hold tight, he said, and then they were moving, the mare picking her way carefully through the snow back toward the road. Emma pressed her forehead against Kenneth's back and let herself absorb his warmth. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel quite so alone. The grief was still there, crushing and heavy, but somehow having another person acknowledge it, having someone offer to help shoulder the weight, made it feel slightly less insurmountable. She did not know this man, had no reason to trust him, but something in his voice when he talked about his own losses told her he understood in a way no one else had. The ride back to Portland took 40 minutes, and by the time they reached the main street, Emma's fingers and toes were burning with the pain that came from thawing out. Kenneth did not take her to the church. Instead, he stopped at a boarding house run by a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, who took one look at Emma's tear-stained face and red eyes and immediately ushered them both inside. "Got a room available?" Kenneth asked, already pulling out coins from his pocket. "I have two," Mrs. Patterson said, eyeing Emma with concern, "but they are not cheap." "How much for a week?" $10, meals included. Kenneth counted out the coins without hesitation and pressed them into the woman's hand. "She needs hot water for a bath, warm food, and a safe place to sleep. Can you provide that?" Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Of course." "Come along, dear. Let us get you warmed up properly." Emma found her voice. "I cannot accept this. I cannot pay you back." Kenneth turned to face her and his expression was gentle but firm. "I did not ask you to pay me back. I offered to help carry your pain, remember? This is part of that." "No arguments. But I do not even know you. Then I guess we will have to fix that, won't we?" He smiled at her for the first time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and infinitely kinder. "I will be back tomorrow to check on you. Right now, you need to get warm and get some rest. Can you do that for me?" Emma wanted to argue, wanted to maintain what little pride she had left, but the warmth of the boarding house and the promise of a real bed were too tempting. She nodded slowly. "Thank you. I do not understand why you are doing this, but thank you." "Sometimes we do not need to understand everything," Kenneth said. "Sometimes we just need to let people help us. Now go on. Get warm." Mrs. Patterson led Emma up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room on the second floor. There was a real bed with quilts piled high, a washstand with a mirror, and a window that looked out over the street. It was the nicest place Emma had been in weeks, and the sight of it made her throat tighten with emotion. "I will have my girl bring up hot water for a bath," Mrs. Patterson said. "And I will bring you some stew in about 20 minutes. You look like you could use a good meal and a good sleep." "Thank you," Emma whispered. When she was alone, Emma sank onto the bed and let Kenneth's coat fall from her shoulders. She buried her face in her hands and cried again, but these tears were different. Mixed in with the grief and exhaustion was something else, something unfamiliar. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just relief at not having to face everything alone for one night. She did not understand Kenneth Zimmerman or his motivations. She did not understand why a stranger would spend his money to help her or why he had looked at her with such understanding in his eyes. But she found herself wanting to know. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of curiosity about something other than her own pain. The hot bath came, and Emma soaked until her skin was pink and her fingers were wrinkled. She washed her hair and scrubbed away weeks of dirt and despair. Mrs. Patterson brought not just stew but also fresh bread, butter, and hot tea, and Emma ate until her stomach was comfortably full. When she finally crawled between the clean sheets of the bed, she fell asleep almost instantly, her dreams free of nightmares for the first time since her father's death. She woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of wagons rattling past in the street below. For a moment, she did not remember where she was, and then it all came flooding back. The frozen river, Kenneth's unexpected kindness, the the warm room and hot meal. She sat up slowly, half expecting it all to have been a dream, but the room was still there, solid and real. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Thompson, it is Mrs. Patterson. I have brought you some breakfast." Emma pulled on her dress from the day before, which someone had cleaned and dried while she slept, and opened the door. Mrs. Patterson stood there with a tray laden with eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. "You have a visitor downstairs," the older woman said as she set the tray on the small table by the window. "That cowboy from yesterday. He said he would wait until you were ready to see him." Emma's heart did a strange little skip. "He came back." "He did indeed. Rode in about an hour ago. Been sitting in my parlor drinking coffee and being very patient." Mrs. Patterson studied Emma with sharp eyes. "He seems like a good man. Polite, respectful, genuinely concerned about your welfare. Those types are rare as hen's teeth out here." "I barely know him," Emma said, but she was already moving toward the washstand to splash water on her face and pin up her hair. "Sometimes the best people are the ones who come into our lives unexpectedly," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile. "Take your time. Eat your breakfast." "He will wait." But Emma found she could not wait. She ate quickly, barely tasting the food, and then made herself as presentable as possible before heading downstairs. Kenneth was indeed sitting in the parlor, his hat on his knee, looking slightly out of place among the lace doilies and floral wallpaper. He stood when he saw her, and Emma noticed that he had cleaned up too. His shirt was fresh, his hair was combed, and he had shaved. "Morning," he said. "You look better. Did you sleep?" "I did," Emma admitted, moving into the room. "Better than I have in weeks. Thank you for this, for all of it. I still do not understand why you helped me, but I am grateful." Kenneth gestured for her to sit, and he settled back into his chair. "I told you why. And if I am being honest, I also did it because I could not stand the thought of riding away and wondering if you would be all right. So I guess it was a bit selfish too." Emma found herself smiling slightly. "That is the least selfish selfishness I have ever heard of." "I have a proposition for you," Kenneth said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "And I want you to hear me out before you say no, all right?" Emma's smile faded, wariness creeping in. "What kind of proposition?" "The Double R Ranch where I work is owned by a man named Robert Reynolds. Good man, fair employer, honest as they come. His wife died 2 years ago, and the ranch house has been falling apart ever since. He needs someone to cook, clean, manage the household. He has been looking for months but has not found anyone suitable. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. It is hard work, but it is honest work, and it would give you a place to live and a steady income. I talked to Robert this morning before I came into town. Told him I knew someone who might be interested. He said he would be willing to meet with you." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. "You arranged a job interview for me. Why?" "Because you said you lost everything and did not know how to keep going. This is not charity. This is an opportunity. You would earn your keep same as anyone else. Robert needs help and you need work. It solves both problems." Kenneth's gray-blue eyes were earnest. "I am not saying you have to take it. I am just saying it is an option, better than sleeping in a drafty church anyway. Why are you doing this?" Emma asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not owe me anything. You could have just left me by that river and gone on with your life." Kenneth was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to his hat. "I guess because I remember what it felt like to think I had no options left. And I remember what it meant when someone showed me I was wrong. You are not broken, Emma. You are just battered. There is a difference, and given half a chance I think you would fight your way back from this. So I am trying to give you that chance." Emma felt tears prick her eyes again, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in the last 24 hours. What if I am terrible at housekeeping? What if I disappoint him? Then you will learn. Robert is patient. And his house cannot get much worse than it already is, so you would have to actively try to make things worse. Kenneth's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Will you at least meet with him, see the place? If you hate it, you do not have to take the job. Emma thought about her alternatives. She had none. The church was a temporary solution at best. She had no money, no prospects, and winter was far from over. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "All right," she said finally. "I will meet with him." Kenneth's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Good. I will take you out there this afternoon if you are up for it. It is about an hour's ride. I do not have a horse. You can ride with me again. My mare does not mind carrying double." So that afternoon, Emma found herself once again sitting behind Kenneth on his paint mare, her arms wrapped around his waist as they rode south out of Portland. The sun was shining, and though the air was still bitterly cold, it felt less oppressive than the day before. Kenneth pointed out landmarks as they rode, telling her about the area, the ranches, the small communities scattered across the valley. "Been a hard winter," he said. "Lost a lot of cattle across the territory, but Robert managed better than most. He is smart about how he runs his operation. Careful, plans ahead." "How long have you worked for him?" Emma asked. 6 months, like I said. Longest I have stayed anywhere in a long while. Keep thinking I will move on come spring, but I have not yet." He paused. "Maybe I will stick around a bit longer now, see how things play out." There was something in his tone that made Emma's heart flutter strangely. She told herself not to read too much into it. He was being kind, nothing more. She could not afford to let herself hope for anything beyond basic human decency. The Double R Ranch appeared on the horizon, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. The main house was large but clearly in need of attention, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The barn and outbuildings looked better maintained, suggesting that Robert Reynolds prioritized his animals and operations over his own comfort. Robert himself came out to meet them, a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He shook Emma's hand warmly and invited her inside, and Kenneth stayed with the horses while Robert showed her around. The house was a disaster. There was dust everywhere, dirty dishes piled in the kitchen and clothes strewn across furniture. But beneath the neglect, Emma could see good bones. The house was well built, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a stone fireplace that dominated the main room. It just needed someone who cared enough to tend it. "I will be honest with you, Miss Thompson," Robert said as they stood in the kitchen. "I am a rancher, not a housekeeper. My wife was the one who kept this place running, and since she passed, I have let it go to hell. I need someone who can cook meals that do not come out of a can, keep the place from falling apart, and maybe remind me to do my laundry more than once a month. In return, I will pay you fair wages, give you your own room, and treat you with respect. Kenneth tells me you have had a rough time recently. I am not going to pry into that. I just need to know if you are willing to work hard and if you can commit to at least staying through the winter." Emma looked around the kitchen, mentally cataloging what needed to be done. It was overwhelming, but it was also concrete. These were problems she could solve with soap and water and elbow grease. Unlike grief, unlike loss, these were things she could fix. "I can do this," she said. "I am a good cook and I know how to keep a house. My mother taught me before she died. I can commit to staying through the winter and probably beyond if it works out. I need this job, Mr. Reynolds. I will not let you down." Robert smiled. "Then the job is yours. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," Emma said without hesitation. "I can start tomorrow." They shook hands on it and Emma felt something loosen in her chest. Purpose. She had purpose again. She had a reason to get up in the morning, a place to be, work to do. It was not everything she had lost, but it was a start. Kenneth was leaning against the porch railing when she came back outside, and he straightened when he saw her face. "You took it." "I did." Emma felt a real smile cross her face for the first time in what felt like forever. "Thank you, Kenneth. I do not know how I will ever repay you for this." "You do not need to repay me," he said, but there was something warm in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Just seeing you smile is payment enough." They rode back to Portland in comfortable silence, and Emma spent the time thinking about all the work ahead of her. She would need to organize the kitchen first, then tackle the rest of the house room by room. She would need to figure out Robert's preferences for meals and his schedule. There was so much to do, and for the first time since her father died, she felt excited rather than overwhelmed. Kenneth helped her down from the mare when they reached the boarding house, his hand steady on her waist. "I will come by tomorrow morning to help you move your things out to the ranch. Not that you have many things, but still." "I have one carpet bag with a few dresses and my mother's Bible," Emma said. "That is all that is left." "Then it will be an easy move," Kenneth said gently. "Emma, I know you are still hurting. I know one job and one kind stranger do not fix everything that is broken. But you are going to be all right. I can see it in you. You are stronger than you think." Emma looked up at him, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed the trajectory of her life in less than 24 hours. "Why do I feel like I have known you longer than a day?" "Maybe because pain recognizes pain," Kenneth said. "Maybe because we both know what it is like to lose everything, or maybe we just got lucky and found each other at exactly the right time." He touched the brim of his hat. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new beginning." Emma watched him ride away, and for the first time since her father died, she felt something other than despair. She felt anticipation. She felt possibility. And beneath all of that, so faint she almost did not recognize it, she felt the first tentative stirrings of something that might eventually become hope. The next morning dawned clear and cold, and Emma was ready when Kenneth arrived. She had already thanked Mrs. Patterson and settled her account, explaining that she had found work at the Double R. The older woman had hugged her tightly and told her to come visit if she ever needed anything. Kenneth loaded her single carpet bag onto his mare and then helped Emma up. She was getting used to riding behind him, to the way he moved with the horse, to the solid warmth of his back against her cheek. It felt natural in a way that should have been alarming but somehow was not. "Nervous?" he asked as they rode out of town. "A little," Emma admitted. "I want to do well." "I need to do well." "You will. Robert is not hard to please. Just cook him decent meals and keep the place from being a complete disaster, and he will be happy." Emma spent the first week at the Double R in a whirlwind of activity. She scrubbed the kitchen from top to bottom, organized the pantry, and started cooking 3 proper meals a day. Robert was delighted, claiming he had not eaten so well in 2 years. She tackled the laundry next, washing mountains of dirty clothes and linens, and then moved on to the rest of the house. Kenneth stopped by every evening after his work was done, ostensibly to help with heavy lifting or repairs, but Emma suspected he just wanted to check on her. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the easy conversation they fell into as they worked side by side. He told her about his day, about the horses he was training, about the other ranch hands. She told him about her progress with the house, about funny things Robert had said, about her plans for tackling the next room. One evening, about 2 weeks after she had started working at the ranch, Kenneth found her in the kitchen kneading bread dough. She had flour on her cheek and her sleeves rolled up, and he thought she looked more beautiful than any woman he had ever seen. "You look happy," he observed, leaning against the door frame. Emma looked up, startled, and then smiled. I think I am, or at least I am less sad. There is a difference. That is good. That is progress. Kenneth came into the kitchen and sat at the table watching her work. Can I ask you something? Of course. That man who broke off your engagement, what was his name? Emma's hand stilled for a moment, and then she resumed kneading with more force than necessary. Charles Hendricks. Why? Just curious. Was he a good man? I thought so at the time. He was respectable, stable, well employed. My father approved of him. We were not deeply in love, but I thought we would have a solid partnership. Emma's voice hardened. But when everything fell apart, he could not run fast enough. He said he could not afford to take on my burdens. Said he needed a wife who could contribute financially to the marriage, not one who would drag him down. Kenneth felt anger kindle in his chest. He was a fool. He was practical, Emma said, though there was bitterness in her tone. I cannot really blame him for not wanting to tie himself to someone with nothing to offer. You have plenty to offer, Kenneth said firmly. You are smart, capable, strong, kind. Any man would be lucky to have you. Charles Hendricks is a coward and an idiot, and he is going to regret losing you for the rest of his life. Emma stopped kneading and looked at Kenneth, her eyes wide. You really believe that? I do. Kenneth held her gaze. You are remarkable, Emma Thompson. I saw it that first day by the river. You were broken and grieving, but you were still standing, still fighting, even if you did not realize it. That takes courage. That takes strength. Charles could not see that, but I can. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, and it had nothing to do with the warm kitchen. Kenneth, You do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know, wanted you to understand that you are worth so much more than some fool who could not see your value. They stared at each other across the kitchen, and the air between them felt charged with something new and electric. Emma's heart was pounding, and she could not seem to look away from Kenneth's eyes. Finally, she cleared her throat and went back to her bread dough, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. Kenneth stayed for dinner that night, as he had been doing most evenings. Robert was always happy to have the company, and Emma had gotten used to setting 3 places at the table. They ate her pot roast and fresh bread and talked about the upcoming spring, about plans for the ranch, about news from town. It felt domestic and comfortable, like a family, and Emma found herself treasuring these evenings more than she wanted to admit. After dinner, Kenneth helped her with the dishes while Robert went to check on a mare that was due to foal any day. They worked in companionable silence, Emma washing and Kenneth drying, and when their hands touched in the soapy water, neither of them pulled away immediately. Emma, Kenneth said quietly, I need to tell you something. Her heart started racing. What is it? I am falling for you. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them in for a long time. I know it has only been a few weeks. I know you are still healing from everything you have lost. I know I have no right to feel this way, but I cannot help it. Every time I see you smile, every time we talk, every time you laugh at something I say, I fall a little harder. And I needed you to know. I do not expect you to feel the same way. I just could not keep it to myself anymore. Emma stood frozen, her hands still in the dishwater. Her mind was reeling. She thought about Charles, about how practical and measured their relationship had been. How she had agreed to marry him more out of duty than desire. And then she thought about Kenneth, about how safe she felt with him, how he made her laugh, how her heart skipped every time she saw him riding up to the house. Kenneth, she said slowly, turning to face him, I did not think I would ever feel this way again. I thought Charles breaking my heart meant I was done with love. But you have been so kind to me, so patient and understanding. You see me in a way no one else ever has. And when I think about you leaving, about you moving on come spring like you said you might, my chest hurts. So if that means I am falling for you too, then I guess I am." Kenneth's face transformed with joy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough, and Emma leaned into the touch without thinking. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Emma whispered. Kenneth leaned in slowly, and when his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. Emma's eyes fluttered closed, and she reached up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to him. The kiss deepened, and she felt something bloom in her chest, warm and bright and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kenneth rested his forehead against hers. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Not in spring, not ever, not unless you tell me to go." "Do not go," Emma said. "Please stay." "I will, I promise." From that night on, everything changed. Kenneth courted Emma properly, with Robert's amused blessing. He brought her wildflowers when he could find them despite the cold. He took her on rides through the valley on his mare, showing her all his favorite places. He held her hand during Sunday services in the small church in town, and he made her laugh with stories from his years on the road. Emma bloomed under his attention. The grief over her father's death and the loss of her former life did not disappear, but it became something she could carry rather than something that crushed her. She found joy in her work, in the house she was transforming, in the meals she cooked, and the life she was building. And most of all, she found joy in Kenneth, in his steady presence and his deep kindness, and the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Winter began to loosen its grip on Oregon. The ice on the river started to break up, and the first green shoots appeared in the fields. Robert commented that he had never seen Kenneth so happy or so settled. The other ranch hands teased Kenneth mercilessly about being love-struck, but he took it all with good humor because it was true. One evening in early March, Kenneth asked Emma to take a walk with him after dinner. They bundled up against the lingering cold and walked toward the river that ran through the Reynolds property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the air smelled like thawing earth and new growth. "This is where I decided to stay," Kenneth said, stopping on the bank and looking out at the water. "Last fall, I was standing right here thinking I would move on when spring came, but something about this place felt different, felt like maybe I could build a life here. And then I met you, and I knew for certain." Emma slipped her hand into his. "I am glad you stayed. I cannot imagine what my life would be like if you had ridden past that day, if you had not stopped. I would have regretted it for the rest of my life." Kenneth turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "Emma, I know we have not been together long. I know some people would say we should wait, take more time. But I have spent 10 years drifting, and I am done with that. I know what I want. I want you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to have children with you and grow old with you. I want everything." Emma's breath caught. "Kenneth." He dropped to one knee right there in the grass, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. "I do not have much to offer. I am just a cowboy with a horse and a saddle and some savings, but I will work hard every day of my life to make you happy. I will carry your pain when it gets too heavy. I will love you with everything I have. Emma Thompson, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Emma's face, but they were happy tears this time. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Kenneth stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her like a man who had just been given the world, and Emma kissed him back with everything she had. They were married 3 weeks later in the same church, where Emma had been sleeping just 2 months before. It was a small ceremony with Robert and a few ranch hands as witnesses, along with Reverend Michaels and Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. Emma wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and Kenneth wore his best shirt and a vest he had bought special for the occasion. When he saw Emma walking toward him down the short aisle, his eyes grew bright with tears, and Emma knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Robert gifted them the small foreman's cabin on his property as a wedding present. It was modest but solid, with 2 rooms and a fireplace, and Emma immediately set about making it a home. Kenneth carved her a set of shelves for her books, and she sewed curtains for the windows. They painted the walls together and filled the cabin with laughter and love. The first few months of marriage were not without challenges. They were still learning each other, still figuring out how to navigate disagreements and bad days. Emma still had moments where grief would overwhelm her, where she would cry for her father and her lost sister and everything that had been taken from her. Kenneth would hold her through those moments, true to his word about carrying her pain. And when Kenneth had nightmares about his family, about the cholera that had killed them, Emma would be there to wake him gently and remind him that he was not alone anymore. But far more common than the hard moments were the good ones. Mornings where they would wake tangled together in their bed, the sun streaming through the windows. Evenings where they would sit on their small porch and watch the sunset while Kenneth played the harmonica he had owned since he was a boy. Nights where they would make love slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies, whispering promises into the darkness. Emma continued to work for Robert, though now she had help with the heavy cleaning from a young girl Robert had hired from town. Kenneth was promoted to head horse trainer, overseeing the breaking and training of all the ranch's animals. They saved their money carefully, both of them having learned hard lessons about financial insecurity, and they talked about their future with excitement and hope. In June, Emma realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be certain, and then she told Kenneth one evening as they sat on their porch watching the stars come out. "I am with child," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Kenneth's face went through a series of emotions so quickly Emma could barely track them all. Shock, joy, fear, wonder, and finally pure elation. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. I think I am about 2 months along. The baby should come in late winter." Kenneth pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We are going to have a baby. Emma, we are going to be parents. We are," she said, laughing at his excitement. "Are you happy?" "Happy? I am over the moon. I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed." He pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face. "You are going to be an amazing mother." "And you are going to be an amazing father," Emma said firmly. "I know you worry about it. I know you wonder if you will know how to do it since you lost your parents so young. But Kenneth, you are the kindest, most patient, most loving man I have ever known. Our child is going to be so lucky to have you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Emma continued her work at the main house, though Robert insisted she take on less as she grew larger. Kenneth became almost comically protective, hovering whenever she climbed stairs or lifted anything heavier than a dish rag. Emma found it endearing even when it was annoying. They turned the second room of their cabin into a nursery, painting it a soft yellow and building a cradle from wood Kenneth carefully selected and sanded smooth. Emma sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands shaking slightly as she held up each finished piece and imagined her baby wearing it. Kenneth would sit with her in the evenings, his hand on her growing belly, talking to the baby about horses and rivers and all the things they would do together. "Boy or girl, it does not matter," he said one night. "As long as the baby is healthy and you are safe, that is all I care about." "I think it is a boy," Emma said, running her hand over her stomach. "I can feel it. He is strong. He kicks all the time." "A son," Kenneth said wonderingly. "Our son." Winter came again, and this time Emma welcomed it rather than feared it. A year ago, she had been standing by a frozen river ready to let the cold take her. Now she was warm and safe and loved, carrying new life inside her, looking forward to the future rather than dreading it. The transformation still amazed her when she thought about it. The baby came in late February during a snowstorm that made it impossible to fetch the doctor from town. Mrs. Patterson, who had experience with birthing, came to stay with them, and Robert's housekeeper, who had delivered 7 children of her own, came to help. Kenneth paced outside the cabin like a caged animal while Emma labored through the long night. Finally, as dawn was breaking, the baby's cry split the air. Kenneth burst through the door without waiting for permission and found Emma propped up in bed, exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. "Kenneth, we have a son." Kenneth crossed the room in 3 strides and sank onto the bed beside her, staring at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like his father and was already squinting up at them with unfocused eyes. "He is perfect," Kenneth whispered. "Emma, he is absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Kenneth took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him carefully against his chest. The infant made a small snuffling sound and turned his face toward Kenneth's chest, rooting instinctively. Kenneth looked down at his son with an expression of such wonder and love that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Hello, little one," Kenneth said softly. "I am your papa, and I am going to love you and protect you every day of your life. That is a promise." They named him James after Emma's father. James Kenneth Zimmerman. He was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and an appetite that kept Emma busy with nursing around the clock. Kenneth proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with James at night when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice. Robert was delighted to have a baby on the ranch and spoiled James shamelessly. The other ranch hands took turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to get him to smile. Emma found herself surrounded by an extended family she had never expected to have, and the loneliness that had plagued her after her father's death was completely gone. As spring arrived and James grew from a tiny newborn into a plump, smiling baby, Emma often found herself thinking back to that day by the river. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, how the cold and grief had almost convinced her there was nothing left worth living for. And she thought about Kenneth, appearing like an angel in the snow, offering to carry her pain. He had saved her life that day. But more than that, he had given her a reason to want to live. He had shown her that even when everything felt hopeless, there was still goodness in the world. Still kindness. Still love. One afternoon in May, when James was 3 months old, Emma and Kenneth took him on a ride out to the river where they had first met. The ice was long gone, replaced by rushing water full of snowmelt. The cottonwood trees were budding with new leaves, and wildflowers dotted the banks. Kenneth dismounted and helped Emma down, taking James from her arms while she shook out her skirts. They walked to the edge of the water, and Emma stood in the exact spot where she had been crying that day over a year ago. "I cannot believe how much has changed," she said quietly. "A year ago, I was standing right here thinking my life was over, and now look at us. We have everything." "You fought for it," Kenneth said, shifting James to one arm so he could wrap the other around Emma's shoulders. "You could have given up, but you did not. You let me help you, and then you did the hard work of rebuilding your life. I am proud of you, Emma." "I could not have done it without you," Emma said, leaning into him. "You are the reason I survived that day, the reason I am standing here now with our beautiful son and a life I love, "You saved me, Kenneth." "And you saved me right back," Kenneth said. "I did not realize how empty my life was until I met you. I was just existing, drifting from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a home. You gave me love. You gave me a family. We saved each other." Emma reached up and kissed him, slow and sweet, while James gurgled happily between them. When they pulled apart, Emma looked out at the river, watching the water rush past. "I hated this place," she said. "I hated what it represented, but now I think it is beautiful. It is where my real life began, where I met you." "We should bring James here every year on this day," Kenneth suggested. "Make it a family tradition. Come to the river and remember how far we have come." "I love that idea," Emma said. They spent another hour by the river, letting James feel the water with his tiny fingers, telling him the story of how his parents met, even though he was far too young to understand. It did not matter. The story was part of their family now, part of who they were. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. Kenneth continued to excel at his work, and Robert eventually made him a partner in the ranch, giving him a stake in the operation and a say in how it was run. Emma managed the household and raised James, and when James was 2, she became pregnant again. Their second child was a girl they named Rose, after Kenneth's mother. She had Emma's auburn hair and Kenneth's blue-gray eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Kenneth, who had been an attentive father to James, became almost absurdly devoted to his daughter, building her elaborate toys and refusing to let her cry for more than 30 seconds before scooping her up. Emma would watch him with their children and feel her heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. This man, this wonderful man who had stopped on a cold winter day to help a stranger, was now her husband, the father of her children, her partner in everything. She had been so certain that day by the river that happiness was lost to her forever. How wrong she had been. When Rose was a year old, Emma's sister Rachel wrote to say she was coming to visit. Emma had maintained correspondence with her over the years, but they had not seen each other since Rachel had moved to Seattle. The reunion was tearful and joyful, with Rachel exclaiming over James and Rose and marveling at how happy Emma looked. "I was so worried about you," Rachel said one evening after the children were in bed. The sisters sat on the porch of Emma's cabin, sipping tea and watching the stars. "After Father died and everything fell apart, you seemed so lost, and then your letters started sounding different, happier. I could not quite believe it until I saw you with my own eyes." "I did not believe it either for a long time," Emma admitted. "Happiness felt impossible, but then I met Kenneth, and he showed me that life could still be good, that I could still have a future." "He is a good man," Rachel said. "You can see how much he loves you and the children. You are lucky, Emma." "I know. Every single day I know how lucky I am." Emma paused, then added quietly, "But it is not just luck, Rachel, it is also choice. I chose to accept help when Kenneth offered it. I chose to take the job at the ranch. I chose to open my heart to love again, even though I was terrified of being hurt. Luck brought Kenneth into my life, but it was my choices that let me keep him." Rachel squeezed her sister's hand. "You always were braver than you thought you were." The visit was too short, but it ended with promises to see each other more often and for Rachel to bring her new beau to meet the family next time. Emma waved goodbye from the porch with James on her hip and Rose in Kenneth's arms, feeling complete in a way she never had before. Years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Rose was more adventurous, always climbing trees and getting into mischief, keeping Emma on her toes. Kenneth taught them both to ride before they were 4, and they would often go on family rides through the valley, exploring new trails and having picnics by various streams. When James was 6 and Rose was 4, Emma became pregnant again. This time, she delivered twins, 2 girls they named Sarah and Grace. The cabin felt almost too small with 4 children, so Kenneth and Robert's other ranch hands built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The expansion took most of the summer, and Emma directed the work while managing 4 children under the age of 6, a feat that left her exhausted but satisfied. Kenneth continued to thrive as a partner in the Double R. He had a gift for horse training that brought clients from across the territory, and the ranch's reputation grew. He invested his earnings wisely, saving for the children's futures and slowly building security for his family. Emma took in sewing and sold baked goods in town, contributing to their savings and teaching the children the value of hard work. Robert, now in his 60s, began to slow down. He still ran the ranch but relied more and more on Kenneth to handle the day-to-day operations. He treated Kenneth and Emma's children like his own grandchildren, spoiling them with candy and stories, and teaching them about ranching and land stewardship. One evening, when the children were all in bed and Kenneth and Emma were finally alone, Kenneth pulled out a sheaf of papers and spread them on the kitchen table. "What is this?" Emma asked, sitting down beside him. "Robert wants to sell me a piece of the property," Kenneth said, his voice tight with excitement. 200 acres on the north side with good water and grazing. He is giving me a fair price and willing to let me pay it off over time. We could build our own ranch, Emma. Not work for someone else, but build something that is truly ours to pass down to the children. Emma's heart started pounding. "Can we afford it? If we are careful and keep saving, yes. It will be tight for a few years, but I have run the numbers a dozen times. We can do this. We can build something lasting." Kenneth took her hands. "What do you think? Is it too much of a risk?" Emma thought about the woman she had been, standing by a frozen river with nothing left. She thought about how far they had come, how much they had built together. Risk had once terrified her, but now she understood that calculated risk was how you achieved dreams. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us build our own ranch, the Zimmerman Ranch." Kenneth grinned and pulled her into a kiss. "Have I told you lately that you are amazing?" "Not in at least an hour," Emma teased. "You are falling behind." They purchased the land, and Kenneth immediately began making plans. He wanted to focus on horse breeding and training, building on his reputation and expertise. Emma suggested they could also run a small cattle operation and maybe keep some chickens and pigs. Together, they sketched out their vision, arguing good-naturedly about barn placement and pasture rotation and 100 other details. The actual construction of their new ranch house took 2 years. Kenneth and hired help worked on it whenever they could spare time from the Double R. Emma designed the house herself, drawing on everything she had learned from managing Robert's household. She wanted something practical but warm, with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a large kitchen where they could all gather. When the house was finally finished, Emma stood in the empty front room and cried. Kenneth came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest," Emma said. "Kenneth, we did it. We built this with our own hands and our own money. This is ours. No one can take it away from us." "No one," Kenneth agreed. "This is our legacy, Emma, for James and Rose and Sarah and Grace and any other children we might have. This is the foundation we are building for generations to come." They moved into the new house that fall, and it felt like coming home in a way their cabin never quite had. The children each had their own rooms, which led to some adjustment and a few tears, but eventually everyone settled in. Emma planted a garden and hung curtains she had sewn. Kenneth built furniture in his workshop during the long winter evenings. Slowly, the house transformed from an empty shell into a warm, lived-in home full of laughter and love. The Zimmerman ranch grew steadily over the next decade. Kenneth's reputation as a horse trainer brought clients from across Oregon and even from California and Washington. Emma managed the books and the household, her organizational skills proving invaluable to their success. The children grew and took on more responsibilities, learning the ranch business from the ground up. James, at 16, was already nearly as skilled with horses as his father. Rose, at 14, had a head for numbers and helped her mother with the accounts. Sarah and Grace, now 10, were in charge of the chickens and the vegetable garden. They were a family unit working together, and the ranch prospered because of it. Emma sometimes looked at her grown and growing children and marveled at how time had passed. It seemed like just yesterday she was holding baby James for the first time, and now he was taller than her and shaving and talking about courting the blacksmith's daughter. Where had the years gone? But even as the children grew more independent, Emma and Kenneth's relationship only deepened. They still took walks together every evening after dinner when weather permitted. They still sat on their porch and watched the sunset, Kenneth playing his harmonica while Emma hummed along. They still made love with the same passion and tenderness they had as newlyweds, perhaps even more so because they knew exactly how lucky they were to have found each other. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kenneth took Emma back to the river where they had first met. The children were old enough to be left alone for an afternoon, and Robert was happy to check on them. It was March, the same time of year when they had met, and the river was running high with snowmelt. They stood on the bank hand in hand, looking at the water rushing past. Emma was 43 now, her auburn hair streaked with silver. Kenneth was 48, with lines around his eyes and gray at his temples. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people they had been 20 years ago, scared and hurting and desperate for connection. "I have been thinking about that day a lot," Emma said. "How close I came to not being here, how easily I could have made a different choice." "But you did not," Kenneth said firmly. "You chose to keep going, you chose to accept help. You chose life, Emma, that was all you." "It was both of us," Emma corrected. "You chose to stop and help a stranger. You chose to see value in me when I could not see it in myself. You chose to love me even when I was broken. We chose each other, Kenneth. Every day for 20 years, we have chosen each other." Kenneth pulled her close and kissed her temple. "And I will choose you every day for the next 20 years and beyond. Until the day I die, Emma, you will be my choice." "And you will be mine," Emma whispered. They stayed by the river for hours, talking about their life, their children, their dreams for the future. Emma told him she wanted to see all 4 children settled and happy. Kenneth said he wanted to write down his horse training methods so they could be passed down. They made plans and shared memories and held each other close, grateful for every moment they had together. As the sun began to set, Kenneth pulled a small wrapped package from his coat pocket. "I got you something." Emma unwrapped it carefully and found a delicate silver locket. Inside were tiny photographs of their 4 children on one side and a picture of Kenneth on the other. "Kenneth, it is beautiful," she breathed. "Look at the inscription," he said. Emma tilted the locket to catch the fading light and read the words engraved on the back. "You carried my pain. I carry your heart." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Kenneth said with a smile, "but I love you perfectly, that much I can promise." They rode home in the twilight, Emma's head resting against Kenneth's back, the locket warm against her chest. When they arrived at the ranch, they found the children had prepared a surprise anniversary dinner, with flowers on the table and all of Emma's favorite foods. The family gathered around the table, laughing and talking over each other, and Emma looked around at her loud, chaotic, beautiful family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what she had earned by not giving up that day by the river. This joy, this love, this life full of meaning and purpose. Kenneth had offered to carry her pain, and in doing so, he had helped her find the strength to carry herself. Together, they had built something remarkable. More years passed. James married the blacksmith's daughter, a kind young woman named Mary, and they had 3 children in quick succession. Rose shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to attend college in Portland to study mathematics, and Kenneth and Emma supported her decision despite the raised eyebrows of their neighbors. Sarah and Grace remained close, eventually marrying brothers from a neighboring ranch and settling nearby. Kenneth and Emma became grandparents, then more grandparents, until they lost count of how many grandchildren were running around at family gatherings. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, as Kenneth began to step back and take a more advisory role. Emma taught her daughters and daughters-in-law her recipes and housekeeping methods, passing down the skills her own mother had taught her. Robert Reynolds died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, leaving his remaining land to Kenneth in his will. It was a testament to the bond between the 2 men and Robert's recognition of everything Kenneth had done for the ranch over the decades. The funeral was well attended, and Kenneth delivered the eulogy with tears streaming down his face, talking about the man who had given him a chance and become like a father to him. As Kenneth and Emma entered their 60s, they began to slow down. Kenneth's joints ached on cold mornings, legacy of years of hard physical labor. Emma's eyesight was not what it used to be, and she needed spectacles for reading and sewing. But they were healthy and active, still deeply involved in the ranch and their family. One winter evening, when Emma was 67 and Kenneth was 72, they sat by the fire in their living room. The house was quiet, the grandchildren all gone home, and it was just the 2 of them like it had been in the beginning. Emma was knitting a blanket for their newest great-grandchild, and Kenneth was reading the newspaper. "Kenneth," Emma said suddenly, setting down her knitting. He looked up from the paper. "I want to tell you something I have never quite put into words." Emma's voice was serious, and Kenneth set aside the newspaper to give her his full attention. "That day you found me by the river, when you said you would carry my pain for me, I thought you were making an empty promise. I thought it was just pretty words that did not mean anything real. But you have spent every day of the last 46 years proving me wrong. You have carried my pain, my fears, my burdens. You have shouldered responsibilities you did not have to take on. You have loved me through grief and joy and everything in between. And I need you to know that it made all the difference. I would not have survived without you. I would not have thrived without you. You gave me a life worth living, Kenneth Zimmerman, and I will never be able to thank you enough for that." Kenneth's eyes were bright with tears. He stood up and crossed the room, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. "Emma, you gave me exactly as much as I gave you, more even. Before I met you, I was a man without roots, without purpose, without love. I was just passing through life without really living it. You showed me what it meant to have a home, to have a family, to have something worth fighting for. We saved each other that day. We have been saving each other every day since, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, because it led me to this. To you, to the life we built together." Emma cupped his weathered face in her hands and kissed him softly. "I love you. I have loved you since the day you offered to carry my pain, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Kenneth said. "My Emma, my heart, my home." They held each other by the fire, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had chosen each other every day since, who had built a legacy of love that would outlast them both. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the land in white. But inside the Zimmerman house, all was warm and bright and full of love. The years continued their march, as years do. Kenneth and Emma celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed half the county. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Emma danced with Kenneth under the stars, just as she had at their wedding so many years ago. "Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Kenneth whispered in her ear as they swayed to the music. "And you are still the man who saved my life," Emma whispered back. Kenneth's health began to decline when he was 76. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age. His breathing became labored sometimes, and he tired more easily. Emma, still relatively healthy at 71, took care of him with the same devotion he had always shown her. She made sure he took his medicine, prepared meals that were easy on his digestion, and sat with him for hours telling stories and holding his hand. One afternoon in early spring, Kenneth asked Emma to take a walk with him. She was hesitant, worried he was not strong enough, but he insisted. They walked slowly, arm in arm, down to the river that ran through their property. The same river where they had met all those years ago. They sat on a bench Kenneth had built decades earlier, and he put his arm around Emma's shoulders. "I have been thinking about what comes next," he said quietly. "Do not talk like that," Emma said, her voice sharp with fear. "You are fine. You are going to be fine." "Emma, love, we both know I am not fine. I am old and I am tired and my body is wearing out. That is just the truth." Kenneth squeezed her shoulder gently. "But I am not afraid." "Do you know why? Because I have lived a full, beautiful life. I have loved you for 50 years. I have raised 4 incredible children. I have built something lasting. I have no regrets, Emma, not one." Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I am not ready to lose you. I cannot do this without you." "Yes, you can. You are the strongest person I know. You survived losing everything once. You can survive losing me too." Kenneth turned her face toward his, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "And you will not be alone. You have our children and grandchildren. You have the ranch. You have a full life still to live." "It will not be the same without you," Emma sobbed. "No, it will not, but it will still be good. You will make sure it is good because that is who you are. You are a survivor, Emma, a fighter. That day I found you by the river, I saw that in you even when you could not see it yourself, and that has not changed." Kenneth kissed her forehead. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me you will not give up. Promise me you will keep living, really living, even after I am gone. Promise me you will still find joy in sunsets and grandchildren and warm bread and all the little things that make life worth living. Promise me you will not just exist, but truly live." Emma was crying too hard to speak, but she nodded against his chest. Kenneth held her while she sobbed, stroking her hair and murmuring words of comfort and love. They sat by the river until the sun began to set, holding each other close, memorizing the feeling of being together. Kenneth passed away peacefully 3 weeks later, in his sleep, with Emma holding his hand. The funeral was the largest the county had ever seen, with people coming from across the state to pay their respects to a man who had touched so many lives with his kindness and integrity. Emma stood dry-eyed through the service, her children and grandchildren surrounding her, drawing strength from their presence even as her heart shattered into pieces. The weeks after Kenneth's death were the hardest of Emma's life. even harder in some ways than the weeks after her father died. Kenneth had been her partner for 50 years, her best friend, her love, her anchor. The house felt too big and too empty without him. The bed felt too cold. She kept expecting to hear his footsteps on the porch or his voice calling her name. But Emma had made Kenneth a promise, and she intended to keep it. She got up every morning even when she wanted to stay in bed. She cooked meals even when she had no appetite. She tended her garden and visited with her grandchildren and kept herself busy with the work of living. It was brutally hard, and there were days when she stood by the river and cried until she had no tears left. But she did not give up. Her children wanted her to move in with one of them, but Emma refused. This house, this ranch, was hers and Kenneth's. It was where they had built their life together, and she was not ready to leave it. Instead, James and his family moved into the main house with her, giving her company while still respecting her independence. It was a good compromise, and Emma was grateful for her son's steady presence. Slowly, painfully, Emma learned how to live without Kenneth. She would never stop missing him, never stop feeling his absence like a physical ache. But she found ways to keep going. She threw herself into helping raise her great-grandchildren, passing on stories about their great-grandfather. She finished writing down all her recipes in a leather-bound book for future generations. She even took up painting, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for. On what would have been their 52nd wedding anniversary, Emma went alone to the river where they had first met. She brought flowers and sat on the bench Kenneth had built, looking out at the water. The pain of his loss was still sharp, but it was bearable now, manageable. "I kept my promise," she said aloud, as if Kenneth could hear her. "I am still living. It is hard without you, my love. Some days it is so hard I do not think I can bear it, but I am doing it. I am surviving, just like you knew I would." A breeze rustled through the cottonwood trees, and Emma chose to believe it was Kenneth's way of answering her. She sat by the river for a long time, remembering everything they had shared, all the years of love and laughter and partnership. The pain of loss was real, but so was the gratitude for having had Kenneth in her life at all. Emma lived for 6 more years after Kenneth's death, staying active and involved with her family until the very end. She died peacefully at the age of 77, surrounded by her children, with a smile on her face and Kenneth's name on her lips. She was buried beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, their headstones side by side for eternity. The Zimmerman Ranch continued to thrive under James's management, and then his sons after him. Kenneth and Emma's great-great-grandchildren still work the land today, raising horses and cattle, keeping alive the legacy of 2 people who met by chance on a frozen river and built something beautiful together. In the main house, now over 100 years old but lovingly maintained, there is a framed photograph on the mantel. It shows a young couple on their wedding day, the man tall and handsome in his best shirt, the woman beautiful in a simple blue dress. They are looking at each other rather than at the camera, and the love in their eyes is unmistakable. Beneath the photograph is a small brass plaque with an inscription. He offered to carry her pain. She gave him her heart. Together they built a legacy. The current generation of Zimmermans tells the story to their children, keeping alive the tale of their ancestors who found each other at exactly the right moment. They talk about Emma's courage in accepting help when she needed it most. They talk about Kenneth's kindness in stopping for a stranger. They talk about the love that sustained them through 50 years of marriage and countless challenges. And every spring, on a day in early March, the family gathers by the river that runs through their property. They bring flowers and tell stories and remember the 2 people who started it all. The children play in the grass while the adults stand quietly by the water, contemplating how one moment of compassion changed the trajectory of so many lives. Because that is what Kenneth and Emma's story really is. A testament to the power of kindness, to the importance of helping others even when it costs us something, to the possibility of redemption and new beginnings even when all seems lost. It is a reminder that we never know how one small act of compassion might ripple out into the world, changing not just one life but dozens, maybe hundreds. Emma had been ready to give up that cold March day in 1881. She had been crushed under the weight of her grief and loss, unable to see any path forward. And Kenneth, a man she did not know, had looked at her pain and said, "Let me carry that for you." Those simple words, that simple offer of help, had been enough to get her through one more day. And then another, until she had built an entire life, a beautiful life, full of love and meaning and purpose. It all started with one person seeing another's pain and choosing to help, one person offering to share the burden, one person refusing to ride past someone who was suffering. That is the legacy Kenneth and Emma left behind, more valuable than the prosperous ranch, more precious than the dozens of descendants. They left behind a reminder that we all have the power to save each other, one small act of kindness at a time. Their story is not just a love story, though it is certainly that. It is a story about hope when hope seems impossible, about finding strength we did not know we had, about building something beautiful from the ashes of loss, about two broken people who healed each other and became whole. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Kenneth and Emma are together again. He is playing his harmonica and she is humming along. They are walking by a river, hand in hand, marveling at everything they built together. They are young again and old at the same time, containing all the versions of themselves they ever were. And they are happy, so deeply, profoundly happy, knowing that their love did not just change their own lives but echoed down through generations, a legacy of love that will never die. The frozen river thawed long ago, and spring has come around 100 times since that March day when Emma stood weeping and Kenneth offered help. But the impact of that moment remains, carved into the bedrock of one family's history, a shining example of what can happen when we choose compassion over indifference, when we choose to see another's pain and offer to help carry it, when we choose love. That is the story of Emma Thompson and Kenneth Zimmerman. That is the story of two people who met by chance and built a love story for the ages. And that is the story that their descendants will continue to tell for generations to come, keeping alive the memory of the day a cowboy stopped by a frozen river and said to a weeping woman, "Let me carry that pain for you." And in doing so, he changed everything.